So I'm really delighted that the weather gods have allowed our second keynote speaker, my friend Ambassador Kim Won-soo, to join us. Ambassador Kim is the UN Undersecretary for Disarmament Affairs and head of the UN Office of Disarmament Affairs. He's literally Ban Ki-moon's right-hand man on nuclear disarmament issues. When I worked for President Obama, I had the pleasure of visiting you in New York every once in a while, and we talked about and worked on some ticklish issues like the NPT Review Conference and the Conference on Disarmament, and my favorite, efforts to hold a conference on a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. And I always found Ambassador Kim to be an extremely able diplomat. I know that the Secretary General will depend heavily on your support for the comprehensive review of 1540, and I hope that ODA will continue to provide strong support for implementation of the resolution. So let's welcome Ambassador.
Thank you, Gary, for very personal but very generous introduction. But when I first invited to Boston, my secretary came to me. You are so busy in between crazy week of the UN and now travel starts and first committee will start. And why you don't just skip and send someone else? But then I looked at the list. Gary, and also my boss, 1540 committee chair coming. So I told my secretary, look, I cannot excuse this. So I did my best, but nature delayed me, and it took me 6 hours from the time I left my place and got here. So in retrospect, I realized it was a big mistake not to take the train. So I switched back to the train, going back to New York. Thanks, Deborah, and also congratulations to the winners. And the winner from Spain just reminded me he's the good student of one of our distinguished advisory board member for the Secretary General on disarmament. So congratulations, and I will also tell your teacher that I think he did a good job, and also we made a good choice by selecting him to the board. First of all, I want to extend my appreciation to the Stimson Center and also Belfer Center and also 1540 Committee. And now I see not only my boss committee chair, but also our colleagues, distinguished coordinator for the group of experts we have on 1540. And also I see Craig from the US mission. So I think you did an excellent job to convene all these people coming up from New York. Of course, as you try today in seeking to engage the youth, I think essay competition is a great idea. And my office did a similar thing early this year, because January 26th of this year marks 70 years anniversary of the first ever resolution adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations. And that resolution is specifically to eliminate atomic weapons. And that was the first ever resolution. And this year marks 70th anniversary. So as part of the celebration, we organized global contest for the poster. And so it drew several thousand entries from over 100 countries. So we selected 12, so that maybe we can use it for the calendar, maybe one for each month. And we use that poster as a way to involve the youth. So wherever I go, I always do some event involving the youth. So Secretary General launched it in New York, and I did it then Geneva, Vienna, and I'm planning to do it in 3 continents: Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America, where my office has regional centers for disarmament. So it'll be year-round a celebration, but also maybe I can draw some of the winners if we can.
Love that.
Yes, maybe it's a free of charge. So we'll involve also essay contest winners. But what I'm trying to say is involving the youth is vital to keep the disarmament agenda alive. And I said exactly the same thing when I met the youth in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Because Hibakusha, the victims of the atomic bombings, their average age now becomes 8. But their stories must continue to be said and heard. And the youth from Nagasaki and Hiroshima have a special responsibility to carry the torch. So, and also, youth doesn't invent nuclear weapons. Our generation, or maybe our father's generation, invented nuclear weapons, but the youth can destroy them. So the responsibility to eliminate them belongs to you, and also it's your right to demand to the leaders to do more to abolish nuclear and all other weapons of mass destruction. So that's why I think 1540 chair and many member states also present today, including also myself, representing the Secretariat, and we will continue to do our best. And also, I want to bring the greetings of the Secretary General, as Gary said. And he was delighted to hear, I'm going to meet you again. Because for the first 7 years of the Secretary General, I was not really directly in charge of disarmament. But as his Deputy Chief of Staff, I had to cover issues like this. So disarmament is one of many issues like this. But whenever Gary came up to raise the issues of a war, nuclear security summit, in addition to all the issues you mentioned, nuclear weapon and WMD free zone in the Middle East, and also how to break the stalemate at the conference of disarmament. So we were engaged in deep and very fruitful conversation without knowing that I was going to take up this job after 7 years. But the conversation I had with you greatly benefited my support to the Secretary General, and also Secretary General's participation in the Nuclear Security Summit. Although the last Washington summit was meant as the last of its kind, but surprisingly, many leaders participating in the Nuclear Security Summit argued, no, we cannot close the book. The process must go on. But of course, President Obama cannot commit to continuing on behalf of his successor. So White House made it clear, well, I mean, let us stop at the moment, but if anything happens in the future, we need to revisit. So we agreed to continue the process with the Sherpa. We call it now contact group. And then ministerial meetings will be held in Vienna this coming December with the option of leaders may meet again in the future. So that much international community recognize the danger we are now facing. And also that's the point of of what Landon just pointed out, the changing threats and risk global landscape, which is increasingly dangerous, and we have to assume that maybe sooner rather than later we may see unthinkable scenario all of us want to avoid may happen as a reality. The recent finding of UN OPCW, the Joint Investigative Mechanism, just confirmed that chemical weapons, toxic chemicals, were indeed used again as weapons by the state and non-state actors. And also we received reports coming from 2 countries in Africa last March that terrorist groups tried to get hold of biological weapons material as well. And if biological attack happens, I can tell you, I'm saying this even yesterday, so I'm sounding like now a broken record, so please bear with me. If biological attack happens, we have 0 institutional capacity. On radiological, nuclear, we have IAEA. On chemical, we have OPCW. On biological, we have 0. All I have is the roster of experts who are trained by us, and we just put on the list. Even, I don't know, attack happens, I call them, whether they are ready to be deployed. So, because we never tested. So unless we do better now, and all of us will be blamed. And that's what I'm telling not only to the Security Council, but also to Biological Weapons Convention Review Conference, because it is going to be held early November. The time is now to make an investment, because if something happens, then it is already too late. 1540 is a great mechanism, but it is for prevention. So we have to think hard, going beyond 1540. What if prevention fails? Just imagine if intentional biological attack happens. Look at what Ebola caused in West Africa. The scale of humanitarian, environmental, law and order consequences will be enormous. And very likely these countries will not be able to cope with. And then who else can help them? On Ebola, it is health emergency, but WHO couldn't handle it, so UN had to step in. But if intentional biological attack happens, then the scale will be even much greater. Then definitely Security Council has to be involved, and Secretary General will have to organize a response. So these are the messages we are trying to remind our member states, but also our stakeholders. Because as many of the essay contestants acknowledged, prevention and response to chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear CBRN threats and risks cannot be done by only government or by only any single country or by any single organization alone, no matter how big or powerful they are. It requires the engagement by all stakeholders, involving governments, international organizations, our partners, but also civil society, industry, academia, and also youth. Because the future is yours. And we hope that today's event will be used as an opportunity to involve the young youth, next generation, in this important debate, so that, as Secretary General once said at the beginning of his second term 4 years ago, that we have many challenges, and all of these challenges are very difficult. But as he said, but nothing is impossible if and when we work together. And he also said that together we can make the future all of us one. Thank you so much.